I spent 3 whole months pouring every ounce of my soul into that project. Late nights, missed birthdays, frozen dinners at 2 a.m., while spreadsheets bled into code and code into visions. And when it was finally celebrated in front of the entire company, my name wasn't even mentioned. Not once. You ever had that moment where your heart drops, not from surprise, but from the cruel confirmation of something you were secretly afraid of all along? That was me, sitting there in a stiff grey chair, coffee gone cold in my hand, while my boss, Mr. Leonard Miller, basked in applause for something I created. Let me back up a little. My name's Scarlett. I'm 29 years old, a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle. I didn't go to Stanford or MIT. I worked my way through a community college, coded through ramen nights, and landed this job after building a recommendation algorithm for an online bookstore that got some attention. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't loud. I was the kind of employee who showed up early, stayed late, and got things done. And this project, it wasn't just another assignment. It was my seed. My idea, one I'd been quietly nurturing for almost a year. We were struggling with logistics, slow deliveries, inefficient routes, rising complaints. So I pitched a system that used AI and machine learning to optimize our supply chain. Predictive routing, adaptive resourcing, real-time adjustments. It would change everything. Leonard wasn't interested at first. He smiled, that kind of smile people use when they're pretending to listen but already planning lunch. Said it sounded ambitious, which in corporate speak usually means don't waste your time. But I didn't stop. I started working on it during off hours, weekends, holidays. I'd sneak into the office while everyone else was at brunch or hiking or doing things that looked good on Instagram. I still remember the glow of my computer screen at 3 a.m., that soft blue light reflecting on my coffee-stained notebook, my fingers moving like they were dancing with the future. I wasn't just writing code, I was writing possibility. I didn't care about credit. Then I just wanted it to work. When the system finally showed promising results, shipping times, dropped errors, decreased, I shared it again. This time, Leonard paid attention. Real attention. Suddenly he wanted to collaborate. He started joining my late-night sessions, asking questions, taking notes. At first I was grateful. I thought maybe this is what recognition looks like. Maybe I was finally being seen. But what I didn't realize was he wasn't helping. He was harvesting. You see, I was the one who planted the seed. I watered it. I protected it from bugs, from frost, from failure. I waited through silence and darkness. And when the flower bloomed, when it finally pushed through the soil and stretched toward the sun, he cut it, put it in a fancy vase, walked it into the boardroom, and told everyone it was his garden. The day of the presentation, I sat quietly in the third row. My palms were sweaty, but my heart was full. I was proud not just of the work, but of how far I'd come. I imagined Leonard would introduce the project, then invite me up to explain the mechanics. I had even rehearsed what I'd say. But as he clicked through slide after slide, my slides, he never once looked at me, never said my name, and when the applause broke out, it hit me like a slap. There it was, my bloom on someone else's table. Afterward, I approached him. I kept my voice calm, though my chest was burning. Leonard, I said, you didn't mention I was the lead on the project. He looked at me like I'd just interrupted something important. Then he chuckled and said, Scarlett, don't worry. You'll get your chance. It's all about the bigger picture. The bigger picture? Was I supposed to be some invisible brushstroke in his masterpiece? That night I went home and stared at the ceiling for hours. I felt erased, not just unappreciated but stolen, like someone had taken something sacred and used it to build their own altar. I wasn't angry yet. Not really, I was just tired. Tired of planting gardens for other people to harvest. Tired of being the roots while someone else got to be the petals. But even then, somewhere inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Because here's the thing about seeds. Even if someone steals your flower, if you've been growing in silence, in struggle and fire, you've already learned how to bloom again. And this time, they wouldn't see it coming. You know that moment when time slows down, not in some dreamy, magical way, but in that cruel, suspended kind of way, where your brain refuses to believe what's happening right in front of you. Yeah, that was me. The big quarterly meeting was supposed to be the highlight of my year. Hell, maybe of my career. So far, I'd been told by our department head to attend because something huge was being shared. And deep down, even though I hadn't been told directly, I knew it was about the AI logistics project. My project. The system that had quietly turned chaos into order. The one I built from scratch. So I showed up in my best blazer hair, done even put on that little gold necklace my mum gave me when I graduated. You know, the one that says believe. It rested right above my heart, like it was cheering me on. The room was packed VPs, senior managers, people from departments I barely knew existed. A low hum of conversation filled the air like static, and then Leonard Miller walked in. My boss grinning like he had swallowed the sun. He started the presentation with that salesman energy he always had when something big was on the line. First slide, a massive efficiency increase, 47%, then charts, metrics, real-time visuals. The screen lit up with the algorithm I wrote, the process I designed, the architecture I fought to defend when people said it was too risky, too advanced, too ambitious. But you know what word never appeared? My name. Not once. He spoke for 20 minutes, talked about innovation, strategy, vision, his vision. He stood there center stage, taking a bow for something I gave everything to. It was like watching someone else accept your award while you're trapped behind soundproof glass screaming, but no one hears you. And the applause. That part hurt the most. People clapped. They even stood up. Someone from finance shouted, "Brilliant, Leonard," and I felt like someone had cracked my ribs open and drained the air from my lungs. I didn't move. I was frozen, a statue with a heartbeat. Afterward, when the crowd thinned out and people filtered back to their desks, I caught him by the espresso machine of all places, still holding that fake smile like a mask he forgot to take off. "Leonard," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I think you forgot to mention something, or someone." He raised an eyebrow, still sipping his overpriced company-paid cappuccino. "I think I said, swallowing hard, you should have acknowledged that I led the project." He chuckled. Not laughed, chuckled. The kind of dismissive sound people make when they think you're being cute. "Oh, Scarlett," he said, "you're young, you've got time. This was a team win. We all played our part." Team win. He hadn't written a single line of code. The only thing he had contributed was pressure and now theft. But I worked on that for months. I pushed late nights, weekends. That system came from me. He stared at me for a second, then gave me this look, half amused, half condescending, and said, "Look, you need to learn something, Scarlett. Sometimes it's not about the credit. It's about learning how to share the spotlight. Don't be greedy. No one likes someone who's obsessed with attention." That word greedy slapped me harder than anything else. Greedy. Was I greedy for wanting my name attached to my work, for wanting to be seen? I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked away, but my hands were trembling. Not out of fear, out of fury. The kind of fury that burns cold. The kind that doesn't scream. It simmers. I went back to my desk, sat down and stared at my screen. The code I had written stared back at me like an old friend I'd betrayed by letting someone else wear its face. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a stolen idea. This was about something bigger. About how women, especially young women in tech, in boardrooms, in every damn industry, are told to be grateful just to be invited into the room. About how we're asked to play small, to hand over our genius with a smile while someone else cashes in. But I wasn't going to let that be the story. Not mine. I took a walk that afternoon, just a few blocks around the building. Cold air in my lungs, phone buzzing with congratulatory messages from coworkers who had no idea they were texting the ghostwriter behind the curtain. And somewhere in that walk I made a decision. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't even fight him. I'd simply outgrow him. Because men like Leonard, they build their towers from the stones other people lay. But people like me, we build foundations, we plant seeds. And I had just realized I wasn't done planting. Not even close. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Not really. Just drifted in and out of that strange fog where the body pretends to rest, but the mind refuses to stop spinning. My ceiling became a canvas for questions I didn't want to ask. Am I just a shadow in someone else's spotlight? Was I naive to believe that hard work alone would speak for itself? Was I, God, forgive me, stupid? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smile. Leonard's smug, polished smile, as he stood on that stage lifting my creation like a trophy he found in his garage. And every time it made my chest tighten, like I was shrinking into myself piece by piece. I started writing in a journal. I hadn't done that since college, but I needed somewhere to pour the storm. My first entry was messy, desperate. They took my light and used it to warm their own hands. I feel like a ghost of myself, like I built something beautiful only to be erased from its story. I reread that line 10 times. But you know what they don't tell you about heartbreak that isn't romantic? It's just as sharp, just as cold. It feels like betrayal in its purest form, because you trusted someone with your passion, your ideas, your time, and they handed you silence. That weekend I stayed off social media. I couldn't handle the corporate posts celebrating Leonard's visionary leadership or my co-workers' proud selfies with the presentation slides in the background. I needed airspace, something to remind me I was real and not just some extension of someone else's ambition. So I did something small. I took a walk to the park near my apartment, the same one I used to walk through when I was job hunting 2 years ago. The trees were still bare from winter, but I stood under one and whispered out loud, "You didn't do all this for nothing." And maybe that was the first spark of something new. Not rage, not grief, just quiet belief. That same night while drinking tea I didn't even like, but kept making out of habit, I opened my inbox, and there it was. A subject line that didn't look like much follow-up from Nova Systems. At first I blinked. Nova Systems. That was a company I'd sent my resume to months ago. Back when I was unsure of where I wanted to go, before the AI project had even taken off, I remembered the name because I admired them. Smaller, scrappier, but doing real innovation in logistics tech. The kind of place where new ideas actually got oxygen. I clicked the email. "Hi, Scarlett. We came across your name recently in connection with a supply chain optimization system being discussed in several industry circles. We'd like to talk." I read that line 3 times. My heart thudded. They didn't just know who I was, they had heard about the project. My project. Even if my name hadn't been on the slides, my fingerprints were apparently loud enough to echo through the right channels. That meant something. That meant I meant something. The interview was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I barely slept the night before, but not out of anxiety this time. It was something else. A hum of energy under my skin. I felt like a violin string being tuned just right. Tense, sure, but ready. The moment I logged into the video call, I was greeted by a panel of 3: a woman named Lena, the head of product, Marcus, their CTO, and a quietly smiling man named VJ, the CEO. They didn't waste time. "Scarlett," Marcus said, "we're honestly excited to speak with you. That system you helped build, how did you even get that kind of optimization working without third-party architecture?" I blinked. You know the backend wasn't third-party." He laughed. "Of course we do. We've seen the footprint. That wasn't a vendor. That was homegrown. Genius, really." I stared at them. These people saw me, not as a cog in a machine, not as someone to mentor or mold into something palatable. They saw me for what I already was. Lena leaned in closer to the camera. "We've had our eye on your work for a while, but after that project took off, we said, okay, it's time." Time for what? They didn't leave me hanging. "We want you to join us as Director of AI Logistics Innovation," she said. "We'll offer full creative autonomy, a team to build from scratch, and a salary that reflects the level you're clearly operating on." I didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. It wasn't just about the title, or the money, or the team. It was the way she said it. You're already operating on that level. Recognition, Real recognition. The kind you don't have to beg for. The kind that sees your roots and your bloom. I said yes. Of course I said yes. After we hung up, I just sat there, my fingers still hovering above the keyboard. I looked down at my journal on the desk, flipped back to that first entry and whispered. They took my light, but they couldn't stop it from shining. I emailed my resignation that afternoon, short, simple, respectful. Leonard didn't reply, not right away, but 2 hours later I got a ping on Slack. Leonard, can we talk? I stared at it for a minute, then smiled. Not today. Because I wasn't his shadow anymore. And the truth, I never was. I had just forgotten for a while that some people only see you as small so they can feel big. But once you stand up, really stand up, you realize the mountain was never that tall to begin with. And sometimes all it takes is one yes. One door. One moment where someone says, "We see you." And suddenly all those sleepless nights, all the silence, all the pain, it wasn't a waste. It was the fire that forged me. And I was finally ready to burn brighter than ever. You ever feel like you're holding on to a secret so powerful it hums inside you like electricity? That was me the moment I accepted Nova Systems' offer. But instead of shouting it from the rooftops or heck even telling my favorite coworker, I chose silence. Not because I was afraid, but because power doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to say nothing at all. Leonard still walked around like a king, strutting past my desk like nothing had happened, dropping little comments during meetings like, "We're just getting started and this momentum is all thanks to bold leadership." I smiled every time he said that. Just a small, polite smile. Not the kind that screams rage, but the kind that says you have no idea what's coming. And I kept working. Those final 2 weeks I gave them everything I had, just like always logged in. Early. Answered questions, helped teammates with their part of the rollout. I even stayed late once to fix a data integration bug I could have easily ignored. Because I wanted no one to say I left bitter or careless. I wanted my last impression to be one of quiet, relentless professionalism, not for their sake, but for mine. See, I wasn't just walking away from a job, I was closing a chapter, and I wanted to close it with the kind of grace that makes people stop and think. Every night I went home, packed one more thing into a box, and added another line to the email I was drafting. That email took me days to write. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what needed to be said and how. No anger, no accusations, just truth. Truth laid out like a surgeon's scalpel, clean, precise, and unflinching. I rewrote the opening line 10 times. But in the end, I started it like this. To the incredible people I've worked alongside. Because not everyone there was Leonard. There were folks who had cheered me on quietly, who had trusted my instincts, who stayed late fixing broken code and running late-night simulations beside me. They deserved honesty too. So I told them how the AI logistics project started, how I stayed up for nights reading about neural patterning models, how I tested a faulty prototype 17 times before it finally started learning correctly. I detailed the weekends I spent on campus at my old university, working with a former professor to troubleshoot edge case behaviors. I listed every phase of the project, each breakthrough, each barrier, and every person who had been part of it, by name, including the intern who had flagged a tiny data bias we would have missed without her. But you know who I didn't mention? Leonard. Not once. And not out of spite. Just because he hadn't been there. Not when it mattered. Not when it was hard. I wrote, "True leadership is not about standing in front of a crowd. It's about standing behind the people building the future. I hope we all remember that." And then near the end of the email, I said the thing that had been burning inside me for days. Light doesn't need to be shared. Not really. It shines on its own, and no one can steal it from you, not if it's coming from within. I sent it on Friday morning, my last day. I clicked send at 9:00 a.m. sharp, stood up from my desk and took one final look around that open floor full of cubicles, cables, and conversations. Then I logged out of my workstation, deleted my account from Slack, and walked out with nothing but my coat, my laptop, and a heart that felt full. For the first time in months. The fallout, it was immediate. I heard from friends still at the company that the email spread like wildfire. People were forwarding it to other departments, quoting lines from it, whispering in elevators. I wasn't there to see Leonard's reaction, but I imagine it was quiet and cold. Because the kind of truth I told, you can't argue with it, you can't dress it up or spin it. It just sits with you, like a mirror you didn't ask to look into. The irony. That was the day Leonard finally replied to my resignation email. All he said was, "Good luck, Scarlett, wishing you the best." No apology, no acknowledgement. And honestly, I didn't need one. Because by then I had something far more valuable than closure. I had clarity. I had a new beginning. Nova Systems welcomed me like a storm. My first day, they handed me the keys to my own team. Real developers, researchers, thinkers, people who wanted to build with me, not above me. The first time I stood in our war room to sketch out the next-gen model, I felt something rise inside me I hadn't felt in years. Pride, not the performative kind, the real kind. The kind that roots deep and grows wild. My first week, they featured me in their internal newsletter, called me a visionary. I laughed so hard reading that I had to sit down. But then I looked at what I was holding, a whiteboard filled with fresh algorithms, a room full of eager minds, and no ceiling in sight, and I realized maybe I was one. All because I didn't let someone else write my story. I did. Word by word. With silence when it counted. With fire when it mattered. And with the kind of quiet revenge that doesn't leave scars, it leaves legacies. So if you're listening to this and someone's ever made you feel like you were invisible, like your work was just fertilizer for someone else's garden, let me say this. You are not invisible. You are not small. You are not disposable. You are the damn light. And the world eventually will see it. Even if it takes time. Even if it takes walking away, even if it takes burning everything down just to rebuild it on your terms. Because the truth, they can steal your credit. They can steal your seat at the table. But they can't steal your fire. And when you learn how to carry it for yourself, really carry it, there's not a soul on this planet who can stop you from rising. Not even a Leonard. You ever taste something so sweet? It lingers. Not on your tongue, but in your soul. That's what this part of the story is. Not revenge, not triumph, just sweetness. The kind you only get when you stop waiting for someone to give you your worth and start giving it to yourself. My first month at Nova Systems felt like breathing for the first time in years. People actually listened when I spoke. They didn't just nod and pretend. They asked questions, they challenged me in the best way. They valued me. And my team. God, my team. Young, bold minds. People who still believed innovation could be beautiful. They reminded me of who I used to be before I got buried under bureaucracy and backstabbing. One afternoon, a junior dev named Mia stayed behind after a meeting and said, "Scarlett, I want to be like you one day." I was so caught off guard I laughed. But then I saw the way her eyes shimmered, not with admiration but with hope. And I realized I had become the person I needed when I was in her shoes, that mattered more than any award, more than any promotion. We built something real together. A logistics model that didn't just crunch numbers. It predicted ethical gaps, flagged human strain points, balanced equity with efficiency. Our AI didn't just move product. It made decisions that respected the people behind the process. And I knew this was the garden I was meant to grow in. But life has a funny way of testing whether you're really over the past. One morning, about 3 months into my new job, I had a meeting across town. The only parking I could find was right in front of my old office. There it was tall, sleek, familiar. The place where I had poured my soul into work that someone else tried to claim. The building where I used to shrink myself to fit into someone else's vision of success. I sat in my car for a second just watching. That's when I saw him. Leonard Miller. Standing just outside the glass entrance, speaking to someone in a suit. He looked tense, his posture rigid, his gestures sharp, and for a brief second our eyes met. He looked away first. I didn't move. I watched him talk, hands raised defensively. I could almost hear the conversation. Why didn't you credit her? What else have you been hiding? This doesn't look good, Leonard. And you know what? I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumphant either. What I felt was peace. I didn't need him to fail. I didn't even need him to admit what he did. I had something better. I had a life that finally fit me. And in that moment I realized what people steal from you doesn't define you. What you do next does. As I pulled away, I whispered to myself, I don't need to win over them. I already won over myself. Later that evening, I was out having dinner with a few people from my new team. It was warm, loud, full of laughter and debates about code and ethics and tech's role in humanity. At one point, someone raised a glass and said, "To Scarlett, for teaching us that integrity scales better than ego." And I smiled, that deep, quiet kind of smile, the kind that comes from knowing you never have to shrink again. Let me say this to anyone listening. Sometimes you don't get the apology. Sometimes they never say thank you. They move on, pretend it didn't happen, rewrite the past in their own favor. Let them. Because your truth doesn't need their permission. Your light doesn't need their spotlight. The world is full of places that will try to dim you, but there are also places, real rare places, where you'll be seen, heard, valued. And when you find it, you'll know. Not because it's perfect, but because you won't have to pretend anymore. I don't need to watch Leonard crash. I don't need to hear my name in boardrooms that never wanted to honor me. I just need this life, this moment, this peace. And if you're still in the middle of your storm, if you're still being overlooked, stepped on, or stolen from, I want you to hear me. It doesn't end there. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You just have to outgrow the cage they put you in. And when you finally do, when you walk out not with vengeance but with vision, not with rage but with resolve, you'll understand what I mean when I say, the sweetest satisfaction isn't revenge. It's freedom.